What's going on, guys? Back talking about two cameras. A lot of you are Nikon fans on this channel. I'm a big fan of Nikon as well, and I've been very privileged to get an exclusive hands-on on the Z7 II as well as the Z6 II with the 51 II as well as the 1424 f2.8. How do these cameras perform? Are they better than the original Z6, Z7? How are these lenses? Let's talk about it. So before we get into this, I want to thank Nikon Singapore for helping me with the camera and the lenses. Having said that though, these are my thoughts and my thoughts only. So let's talk about the Z6 II first, because I think this is going to be the camera a lot of you out there are going to be getting. 24 megapixels is that sweet spot for photography, and you got great video on this as well. So let's talk about the similarities and the differences. Similarities, it looks pretty much the same as the original Z6, but there was something that I noticed that I haven't heard mentioned in other videos. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. But when I took it out of the box, I realized the grip felt a little bit different. It felt a little bit larger. So I asked the Nikon reps here in Singapore, and they did tell me you're actually right. The grip is slightly larger. And that is a welcomed addition because I have larger hands and I like a beefier grip, especially when you're holding lenses, let's say the 51 II or the 70-200 f2.8. You want a good sized grip. And I also feel that my pinky it has a home now versus on the previous one where it was kind of at the bottom a little bit. My pinky has a home on this Z6 II and Z7 II. But a lot of the upgrades, of course, are inside of the camera. Now you have the dual X-Speed 6 processors. This is the same as we're seeing in the Nikon D6. If you haven't seen my review, do check it out right here. Besides that though, you're getting better battery life, up to 340 shots for photography versus 310 shots. You've got a better buffer on this, a much better buffer from 35 frames up to 124 frames thereabouts. And that is really important, up to 14 frames per second versus 12 frames per second. That's not a big deal, but if you're into sports photography or wildlife photography, hey, a couple extra frames, no one's gonna complain. Additionally, you've got better autofocus. This is one of the attributes that you're getting with that dual processor is the autofocusing. And this is the question everybody has on the Z6 II or the Z7 II. Is it worth getting these cameras now? Because of the autofocusing system. Here's my thoughts in a nutshell. Yes, the autofocusing is much better, but it depends. If you're doing photography for people, it's great. Animals, the eye tracking is hit and miss, but I wasn't missing shots when I went to the zoo at all, or even photographing my dog. It did lock onto the subject very quickly, but you're just not getting that eye tracking that you would say let's get on a Canon R6 or R5, which to me is some of the best animal eye tracking focusing on the market, hands down. But Nikon's, while it doesn't have that eye locked on all the time, it flutters here and there. My shots are in focus as you're seeing right here. They are tacked sharp. So I have no complaints at all. Now in terms of photographing people, it doesn't have the distance as let's say the Sony or the Canon has in terms of grabbing somebody in the far distance and then locking onto the eyes. You have to be closer to your subject. Having said that though, I wasn't missing any shots if the eye tracking was on the person but the face was in focus, okay? So maybe it's a graphical interface thing, but I wasn't missing that many shots on this at all. Again, I'm using a pre-production camera on the Z7 II. The Z6 II has just been updated with firmware, so you know, there will be updates coming out there, but as far as I could tell with the animals, it fluttered on and off. But as you can tell by my images here of this lion and of these various different animals, it's tack sharp. So I don't care if I see a little box on the eye. As long as my image is sharp, I'm happy with it. And that's what I was getting out of this autofocusing system. Also, you have this new wide autofocusing for people and for animals as well, which sort of gives you a little box and you can kind of focus within that box. And it's nice in a sense because it really sort of just nails everything down. Because if you are in an area where there's a lot of distractions, this is going to help pinpoint that focusing system for you a lot easier than letting it just spray and pray and just hopefully find the subject that you want to get in focus. Because sometimes that happens with these other autofocusing systems on the cameras, whereas Nikon is really fine-tuning it. So I really like the performances coming out of this camera system in terms of the AF. It's really, really good. Now, I haven't talked about video much on this, but there has been improvement on video. Now, instead of 4K 30, you have to 4K 60 now, but that is with a 1.5 crop. So you are sacrificing a little bit on that, but you at least get 4K 60 out of this. You still get the N-Log, you still can record 422 10-bit into an external recorder, let's say the Atomos Ninja 5, which I have with me as well. So you have all that there, but you're getting a little bit better video quality, and the image, if you're not into like, grading your video, you just want straight out of camera, the Nikon colors with video are really pleasing to the eye. Besides that, let's also talk about the EVF on this. Now, the EVF hasn't changed, but I shoot with a lot of different camera systems out there. And I gotta hand it to Nikon. They've done a tremendous job with the refresh rate on the EVF because it's a very smooth image. I don't get fluttering when I'm doing a continuous autofocus. I don't get any sort of like noise levels in it. It works really well. And that's the thing about the Nikon system. I think you gotta really try it to see these small little nuances that are in the system that really make it a very enjoyable camera to use. Besides that though, it's fast. It's really quick. I love the dual card slot on this. I've got the CF Express card in this. No issues with buffering. The write speeds are fantastic. I got the UHS 2 card slot on there as well if I want backup. All these customizable controls to this. I mean, the only thing I wish it had, to be frank with you, is a flip out display. So when I'm doing video, if I want to record myself, I know what my framing is. I know that I'm in focus. But I'm being non-biased with you right now, and I've used every mirrorless camera system out there. This has become one of my favorites thus far. Let's talk about the Z7 II. So before we get into the Z7 II, I do want to tell you about a couple other updates that apply to the Z6 II as well as this camera as well. Minimum shutter speed. Originally it was 30 seconds. Now it's up to 900 seconds. So if you want to do some really cool low light photography, now you can do it even easier with these Z6 II and Z7 II cameras. Also, you can update the firmware via Snapbridge. So before you had to do it the old-fashioned way, download the firmware, to your computer, put it onto the SD card, insert it into the camera, update it that way. Now you can actually use Snapbridge to update these cameras, which is also a very welcomed addition. But let's talk about the Z7 II. I've always liked the Z7 because of the sensor. That 45 megapixel sensor is a beautiful sensor. You got that dual X-Speed 6 processor in this, the same as you have on the Z6 II. And I just loved using the Z7 when it first came out. And I even like this even more so. You go from 9 frames per second up to 10 frames per second on the Z7 II. Now, up to 20 pictures in the before the buffer would run out. Now you have up to 77 pictures before the buffer runs out. And with the CF Express card slot, that card is so fast, I never had an issue with this at all. I went to the zoo with this. I brought both of these cameras to the zoo and also did some other photography, and I never had an issue with buffering. But again, this camera, because of the sensor, might be for those who do landscape photography, architectural photography, maybe even portrait photography that needs that high resolution sensor. So you're not looking to have as fast of a camera as the Z6 II, but at 10 frames per second, I'm more than happy with it. And it's zero blackout, by the way, in the EVF. And also the EVF has a better refresh rate like the Z6 II. So I was comparing this, for example, to the Sony a7R IV, and this EVF, while it's lower resolution than the Sony a7R IV, blows it away in terms of image quality, in terms of clarity. This is a home run. And I mean, I've used the Panasonic, the S1R, the Leica SL2, even the Sony a7S III, and this is one of the better EVFs out there. Even though it might be lower resolution, it's really sharp and very clear. Okay, what else? Better battery life on this as well. So up to, I think, 360 shots, thereabouts. I mean, this is all give or take depending on how you do your photography anyway, but better battery life, 4K up to 60, zero crop on this. So there's no more 1.5 crop as you get on the Z6 II, zero crop factor on the Z7 II. Now, that's a little bit odd because when you look at higher megapixel sensors like this, you would think that it has less video functionality versus a smaller megapixel full frame sensor. But that's not the case here with the Nikons because the Z7 II does 4K 60 zero crop versus 1.5 crop on the Z6 II. So, which camera to get? That depends on your needs and your budget. But for me, the Z7 II is the all-around camera that I would take with me 10 frames per second is enough for me if I need to photograph things, unless I'm doing, let's say, high-speed sports photography or, you know, wildlife photography that something's running really fast. Yeah, I would grab this, but for majority of what I shoot, 10 frames per second is more than enough. And 4K 60 zero crop is a very welcomed addition. Of course, you do have the N-Log output on the HDMI and all that stuff. 10-bit 422, same as the Z6 II. That's here in the Z7 II. So, you know, it's really small differences between these two cameras. Megapixel, slightly better video quality, slightly less on the speed of it, but autofocusing is just like this. It's really, really good. Now, this is a pre-production camera, so firmware is not final. But even at pre-production firmware, I have no issues with this camera at all. It was great when I needed it to be. Focusing was fast, tracking was great. It really is a big improvement over the original Z7. Again, I wish it had the flip out display. That might be my only caveat, and of course, slightly better animal eye tracking. But again, like the Z6 II, these are really good cameras. And these are gonna make people think twice about Nikon. If you discounted Nikon before, I wouldn't discount them now. They're back in the game, folks. Anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on the Z6 II and Z7 II bodies. I'll be doing a separate video on the 51.2 and the 1424 f2.8 because I think these lenses deserve a separate video. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about these cameras. Is Nikon sort of swaying you into getting to the Z system? I'd be curious with these Z6 II and Z7 II cameras. Are the updates what you were hoping for? Let me know. Like always, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, be safe out there, and we'll chat to you soon. Take care.